In this video, I'm going to continue porting over the Tour of Heroes tests. I'm going to be porting over the dashboard tests. If you followed along in some of my previous videos, you know that I take notes, so I've got some notes for you. And we'll start off by a couple of notes just in general. So in my previous video, I misspoke. I said that the equivalent for before all is to use before each in Mocha. That's not accurate. You should be using before. Before all and before, they simply run a block of code one time before each of your tests run in a given describe block. So let me show you what I mean by that. So in our code, and I've got the old code up right now, I haven't changed it over, and we'll work on that in a minute here. But this whole describe block has a single before each, and so this piece of code would actually run for each of these tests, for each of these it blocks. Which in this case isn't a big deal. It doesn't really prevent anything or change anything. It actually keeps the tests independent from each other, which I like, and we'll go into that in a future video when we talk about test design. But in this case, I'm just simply trying to port over the existing tests, so I don't want to really change the design too much. We'll save that for another video where I do some design and refactoring work on these tests. But in this case, with the before each, it's actually going to launch the browser and reset the page that it's on for every single one of these, which wasn't the original intention of the tests coming from Protractor. Protractor has it where each of these run in a single session kind of consecutively. So the tests sort of depend on each other, which is not great. But again, we'll get into that later. And this became important as we start porting the next section. So the dashboard tests, the tests do depend on each other, so we'll have to use the proper before hook to make that work properly. So the other note I have in here is that there is some simplification we can do. Specifically with the WebDriver IO, the expect and the corresponding matcher, if they're both WebDriver IO, we can kind of simplify the amount of weights we're using. And there's also a little bit of a hint in here. Anytime you're using WebDriver IO expect and a matcher, it does require an await. So that's another little trick you can use to make sure you're using the awaits properly. So for example, I'll go back into the code. This block of code, this line of code right here can actually be simplified. It can simply be, we can remove this await, and this will still run as expected. It will await on the whole thing. So that kind of simplifies it. Also makes the little warning go away that the IDE was giving me about it not being necessary to have an await there. The await needs to be on the outside. If you only leave it here, we run into a problem I talked about in the previous video. All right, so let's just jump into porting the dashboard test over. So we'll go back to here, take a look at what we need to start with. One thing I did do is I did clean up a little bit. I removed, from the previous video, I removed the already ported over code. So the last one had an initial page tests block, and I removed all that code since we ported it over successfully. And I'll start doing that in these videos as well. So I'll kind of walk you through how I clean up some of the code at the end of this one. All right, so let's bring over the first part of this, the first portion of this, and we'll just drop it right underneath our other describe block, and we'll close this out again so we can start running each of these pieces incrementally and see that the tests continue to stay green and passing. As I noted, this really should be a before, so that will work. And we'll change this to URL like last time. And again, using just an empty string or empty quotes, it's going to launch the base URL, which is defined in WDIO conf.ts. All right, so let's change some of these things. This is going to be, it's not going to be count. We're actually going to use the length. In fact, we're going to use WebDriver IO has a method, a matcher, that can figure out the length for us. So to be element array of size, That's what we want, and this should be 4, I believe. That's what the original code was. Yeah, so equal to 4. And we will, let's see here. So we don't have the top heroes yet, so we need to add that code. That's right in here. So bring that over. Add another section here. Typical conversion, so this is an all, so it's a double $. Make sure we've got proper parentheses. And that should fix that. And then, like we were just talking about, let's move this await out to the front. So let's await on the whole thing. And there's a little bit of an interesting thing that'll happen. So the top heroes is an array or a collection of elements, and they do load, those heroes on that page load asynchronously. And what's nice about using a WebDriver matcher, WebDriver IO matcher, is it'll actually wait until that asynchronous piece finishes loading, and it will pull to make sure that 4 elements are available. So it's going to kind of sit on that page until this condition is met, and it'll also time out. So all of these have default timeouts baked into them. So I believe by default it's 10 seconds. So it'll either wait for the 4 elements to appear and be successful, or it'll time out after 10 seconds and this will fail. And that's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and run this, make sure that so far so good. And this is going to also run the previous tests, and in a later video I'll show you how to optimize some of that so you can run specific parts of your code, of your test code. Okay, cool. So as you can see, we've got a new section here of tests. So it has top heroes, so that's good. And we can kind of play around with this so I can show you. So like if we dialed this down to 3, which isn't correct, there's actually 4 heroes, it's going to sit on that page and wait until there's 3, which will never happen, so it'll time out. And you can see it's sitting on this page. You can kind of see some stuff flashing in the IDE. It's trying to find a total of 3 elements, which it will not find. And there you go. So it failed. Back to 4. This is going to work properly. Perfect. So we're back to passing. So let's continue going. All right, so the next piece of this is a little bit more complicated, but nothing we can't handle. So let's copy this over. And we have quite a few things we need to bring over that this piece of code depends on. So at the top, there's probably some constants defined. I believe it's this. It's using a piece of that object, the target hero name, so the property of that object. So we'll bring that over. And then we've got a helper function we need to bring over. Again, I do a control or a command click that brings you to the implementation. Copy this over. For now, I'm just dropping these into the kind of the root of this code, piece of code. And then we need to make quite a few changes throughout here. So top heroes, I believe we already brought that over. Yep, that was from the last piece of code. This needs to change to using array notation instead of a get. So we'll change that. And then we need to await on this piece. Oh, and then we need to bring over that constant as well, which is also at the top. There we go. Okay, so we need to allow WebDriver IO to wait on the array of top heroes to populate, have those promises complete. And then we can grab a specific element out of that array. And that will give us the target that we're looking for. And we can, this is fine. We could probably optimize this, but we'll leave it alone. No big deal. This should be fine as well. And then we don't really need this. WebDriver IO will do just fine waiting on the next thing to load. Once something's clicked, it'll wait. And then we probably need to change a few things here. So we've done something similar in the last video. Is present isn't available for WebDriver O, so we'll take that out. And we'll actually change this. We'll use, they do have a similar matcher, so we'll go to be present, which is good enough. And we'll move the await outside of this piece of code. So start at the beginning of the line. And hero detail, I think we need to bring over as well. I think that's new. So hero detail is this. We'll bring that piece of code over. And again, need to convert this over. So this is just a single element. So that's pretty simple, single $sign. So we've got it to be present. And then, oh, we have another kind of utility, looks like a utility method this time that we need to deal with. So let's bring that piece of code over. And that is up here. So we'll bring the constructor over. We'll just drop this up in the top. And we'll bring over this from detail creational method. And I think I'm missing a brace. So I think that's right. That looks good. And we need to make some adjustments here as well. So this needs to be updated to be WebDriver IO. So WebDriver IO element is what we're looking for there. And we need to convert these over. So when you see an all, it's a $sign. So we'll change all of this out. $sign and fix the parentheses. And we'll use array notation. I believe we need to have another await. So we need to await on this array first. So I think we need an await here. And then I believe we need to await on the specific element to get its text. So 2 awaits in there, that should fix that. And we need to change this one over as well. So this is just a single element, so single $sign. Fix parentheses, and I think that should work. And we'll try it out. We'll see if we run into a problem here. We can easily fix it if I don't have enough awaits. But that looks good. Okay. And just to give some clarity here, what they're doing here is they're actually chaining their selectors. So we're gonna get some details from a hero that's gonna come in, and then off of those details, we're gonna dig deeper and find apparently a collection of divs and a single H2, and we're gonna get some details, some text off of those sub-elements of the hero detail. So a little bit of chaining going on, which is cool. All right, I think, let's see here. So we probably need to await on this because this is probably a promise. And then we need to await on the whole thing because from detail is asynchronous because of some of those selectors that we used just a second ago. So that should be all good. And back to our test, that should have finished that piece out. So let's try running this. Let's see what happens. Perfect. So that looks like that's good. Great. So that one passed. So we've got 2 tests passing now from this new dashboard tests section. So let's keep going then. All right, next up is another one of these kind of helper verification methods or functions. So we'll drop this in. Got a couple of things to bring over. So new hero name is up at the top, and it uses both of these pieces. So it's got a suffix it's using to generate a new hero name. So let's bring that over as well. So that fixes that error, and then we need to copy that code over. And it looks like there's a little bit more. There's an add to hero name helper function we need to bring over. So that's this right here. Okay, so let's start cleaning this up. We'll work kind of inside out. So we'll start with this since that's inside of here, and then we'll keep kind of going up the stack. So another conversion we need to do, single element, so single $. And send keys doesn't exist for WebDriver IO, so you've got a choice of set value or add value. And in this case, they're actually they're appending onto the text that's already in that input field. So we're going to do an add value. So that will append the string onto the input field. Let's do some auto formatting. And that fixes that piece. And then we need to take a look at this. So let's go back up to from detail. I think, oh yeah, we already corrected all of that. So probably just need an await in here. Cool. Okay, so that should work. And here's the little dead giveaway that made me realize that before each wasn't the correct equivalent to before all. They're assuming that you're on a certain view, which is, in my opinion, a bit of a bad practice. All this code should sort of be independent of each other and not depend on previous tests, but that's okay. Again, we're not going to change any of that for now. We're just going to port this stuff over. So this made me think, oh, we really need to be using a before instead of a before each, since the code does, the tests depend on each other. So we're using a before now, which should allow this code to work. And the reason why is that when we do the select and routes to, that's going to land us on a certain page that this test then depends on. All right, so let's give this a try. I think we converted everything over. We'll run it again. Perfect. So we see that we've got another test passing now. Here we go. We're back in our dashboard tests, and we're going to bring over this block. Format that code. And now we're on to, we've made an update to the hero's name, but we're going to cancel out and see that it reverts back in the dashboard. So more of the same. I'm going to change this to a $. Not exactly the same. Okay, so they're using by button text. So we're going to do something similar, and we're going to do something like this. So await, and we're going to say button equals go back. And this is some shorthand in WebDriver IO. This is going to look for text based on an element type. So the button element. It's going to look for the go back text. So we'll wait for that, and then we'll click that. And my IDE was nice and put in some double awaits for us. So we got to wait for the actual element to be found, and then we'll wait for the click to complete. The click to complete. There we go. So we don't need that. We can remove that piece of code. We don't need this either. Sort of. We're actually gonna, let me undo that and we'll talk about this. So what's gonna happen here is we're gonna go back. So we're gonna cancel out of the update and we're gonna go back to the dashboard. And again, the dashboard has some asynchronous pieces to it. And unfortunately, we don't have a wait for Angular in WebDriver IO, but that's okay. We can come up with a custom way to wait for the page to load. And in particular, we're gonna wait for the heroes to load on the page, and that will be good enough to know that the page loaded all the way, or at least for what we need to do. So let's go ahead and we'll remove that code. We're going to do await browser.wait until, and this code's going to be asynchronous in here because we're going to need to do some awaits from WebDriver IO. And what we're looking for here is that we want to see that the top heroes, because that's the next thing we're doing, is we're going to retrieve one of the top heroes. So we need to make sure the top heroes have loaded all the way. So we'll return something out of here. So we'll await this length to be greater than 0. And that will prove, once the length is greater than 0, that'll prove that some heroes have loaded. We don't really care how many, we just know that the heroes have loaded. And so then we can continue on with the code and actually retrieve a hero from that collection. So we need to convert this similar like we did in a previous piece of code. This just needs to use array notation. And it also needs some proper awaits. Maybe just one, I think. So that should be good. And we'll leave this alone. Again, I think there's a way to optimize this, but for now, this is good enough. We can come back in another video and do some even more cleanup to this stuff. But that looks good, so let's try running, let's auto format just in case, and let's run that code. Perfect. We can see that it reverts our changes from here, which is great. This code is still working, or at least this test code is still testing properly. So let's keep moving. This is literally the same code as above, so they're just kind of repeating the same steps. That way they can actually start saving stuff. So you know what, we'll just bring over that whole block. We know these two it blocks work already, so we'll just bring it all over. And we need to make some adjustments here. So another button text, so we'll do something very similar. I'm just gonna steal this code, drop it right in here. Let's auto format that. And we're gonna change this text to save. So as you can see, we're gonna save instead of going back. Instead of canceling, we're gonna save. Don't need this code. Gonna convert this over. That piece that I just removed, we'll do this again. We need to make sure that the heroes load up when we get back to the dashboard. Copy this over. This doesn't change. And then this code should remain the same, but notice that we're going to be comparing the new hero name because we're actually saving this, so we should get an updated hero name. I think that's all good. So let's run that piece of code. Perfect. Awesome. So you can see we've got all these tests passing now. Sorry, scrolling around a little bit. Getting a little wild with the mouse. All right, so we've got all of our tests passing. I think that was the last it block for that describe. It sure was. So I think we're in good shape here. So let's do a little bit of cleanup at this point. So we've ported over all of this code. So let's go ahead and remove it. And And we'll go and see if there's anything else that we can remove. Doesn't look like any of those constants can be removed yet. Probably used by other tests, so we won't remove those just yet. But I believe we have some helper functions that we can remove. Yeah, so we don't need this anymore, so we'll remove that. And this was from a previous video, previous test that we ported over. We don't need this code anymore. One last thing, since we did remove a couple of functions, let's double check our constants at the top. Maybe those are no longer in use because of the code we removed. So scroll back up, and yep, as we can see, we've got this lighter colored constant here that's signifying that it's no longer declared but never used, so never read. So we'll remove that, we don't need it. And one last thing I forgot to do, let's go back to our actual set of tests and let's fix this. So this should be this from a previous video. This should have been before and not before each. So let's fix that. And let's run the code one more time just to make sure we didn't mess anything up. And then we'll commit this code. So it's always good to kind of do a last run or kind of a last look at everything before you commit your code. Make sure we stay in a stable state. Great, so everything's passing. Perfect. Okay, so let's go and commit this. So first we're going to want a new branch. Create a new branch. So we'll do something like port dashboard end-to-end tests. And let's take a look at what changes we made. And just kind of make sure that the changes are what we expect. So yeah, we removed that. Removed a block of code. This is the old test code, so we already ported that over, so that whole thing was removed. That's great. And some of those helper functions we just removed, so that looks good. So we'll put a general message of ported dashboard E2E tests, something like that. And we'll add some details, removed old code that is now ported. And what else did we do? So take a look at this one. And this all makes sense. A lot of the stuff that we brought over in this video. Got that new hero class that has that helper creational method. Got some new selectors in here. Changed our before, so maybe we'll make mention of that. Fixed a test design issue. Should have used before instead of before each. And the rest of this, oh, and we've got some optimization, so we'll make a note of that as well. Cleaned up duplicate awaits for WebDriver IO expecs and matchers. Something along those lines, matchers. There we go. And we'll put in just a finished porting dashboard tests. How about that? Okay. So that's good enough. Let's commit all of that. Let's go ahead and publish. And we'll close out our working trees since we know that those are all committed now. And I think that's about it. Let's double check. I think we cleaned up everything. Let's look at the notes. So removed the old code, cleaned up unused code, committed, ported code. Cool, that's it. So next video, we'll be tackling the next set of tests. And then eventually we'll be looking at test design and probably doing some refactoring and cleaning up this stuff using page objects, things of that nature. So stay tuned. And as usual, if you've got questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave them for me and I will help answer what I can. Till next time, peace.